I was the kid where if you told me I needed to go to the counseling office, I would roll my eyes and say, you have no idea what I've been through. It was like my school tried so hard, but I was so resistant because I was getting high every day. I was in and out of the hospital, in and out of treatment centers. Like, I mean, my dad was like moving heaven and earth to try to get me to where I needed to go. And you know, if there was, I talk about this often, like if there was one thing that my dad did do that was so beneficial was he would always check in on me like every day. Every night he would ask me like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How was your day? And like being like a 16, 17-year-old, I'd slam the door in his face. I'd yell at him. I'd cuss at him. Like I was not a very nice kid.
But he knew you were using too?
Yes, he did. And he would say to me like, I love you. I'm never going to give up on you. I'm never going to stop being there for you. And, you know, like, I remember being 17 years old and like being like the winter and thinking that I'm not going to make it past 18 and like having been to multiple treatment centers and having been to like the hospitals and like knowing in my core that drugs and alcohol were not helping me. Like they were hurting me. Knowing that like self-harm was like hurting me, knowing that like isolating and like it just wasn't working anymore. And like there's a reason why kids and adults, right, like use negative coping skills because in the beginning they think it works because it hits like that instant gratification, like swiping the credit card or dating the boy you shouldn't date. Like it's like in the beginning, it's like this is right. But at the end, you're left broken, empty, alone. And like, that's where I was. And, you know, it was around that time where I had the courage to like ask my dad, like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't. And my dad drove me to a treatment center called Karen Treatment Centers in Reading, Wernersville area. And I spent like 5 months in treatment.
On this episode of TLC Connections, we hear from Kristen Harootunian, who at 17 was battling addiction, mental health struggles, and a deep sense of isolation. Today, she's a national speaker, sharing her story with students, parents, and educators as part of Minding Your Mind's mission to end stigma and promote mental wellness. Her powerful journey highlights the transformative impact of asking for help, reminding us that recovery isn't a solitary path, but one shaped by connection, support, and shared resilience. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to TLC Connections, the podcast where educators, counselors, coaches, and community leaders come together to inspire change, one connection at a time.
Welcome to TLC Connections. My name's Julie Knudsen. I'm the Director of Development here at the Lincoln Center, and I'm really excited today to have Kristen Harootunian with us from Minding Your Mind. Minding Your Mind is a nonprofit that's dedicated to ending stigma and destructive behaviors associated with mental health issues, moving away from crisis-based response to prevention through education. So with that, I'm going to just, turn it over to you, Kristen, if you can tell us a little bit more about Minding Your Mind and how you got connected in your role there.
Yeah, so really, really excited to share about Minding Your Mind. I mean, obviously, I'm really passionate about the work that they do. Our whole mission is reducing stigma associated around mental health. And so like I've been with the organization for about 8 years. So I started speaking with them when I was like 19. And never in a million years would I think that like I would be the person that goes into schools or community centers and like is like sharing my story. But like, that's like the unique thing that Minding Your Mind does is that, there's a bunch of young people that are trained and taught on how to share their stories in an effective, hopefully non-triggering, like honest, real, vulnerable way in order to have like the youth or parents or caregivers or staff that they're speaking to be able to recognize like warning signs and symptoms and signs of like, this is what we're looking for when we're thinking about like mental health. And if, our mental health is like tracking downward. And then also this is how to ask for help. And we're not just like telling these kids, like, this is what you need to do. It's like our own personal testimony, which I think makes it really real.
So tell me if you could share a little bit of your story and how did you even find Minding Your Mind at 19?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll tell you what, I mean, I found Minding Your Mind completely by accident. Part of my story is I'm in recovery from substance use disorder. So this past February 10th, I actually celebrated 10 years clean.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Which is like incredible, right? And like it's just been such a journey. But part of my recovery process was going to a recovery high school. I mean, I went to the Bridgeway School, which is in the city of Philadelphia. And I don't know if this is still the case, but at the time it was the only recovery high school in Pennsylvania for kids that struggle with substance use disorder. And when I went to that school, I had just gotten out of rehab, maybe like 6 months of sobriety under my belt, going to 12-step meetings, going to therapy. And I was never the kid that really liked being in school. Like I always wanted to skip. I was always sick, like I just never wanted to go. I was truant. Like I was the truant kid in like my public school. And the principal at the time, Rebecca Bonner, she was like, how would you like to not go to school today? And I was like, I would love that opportunity. Like, what do I have to do? And she was like, I want you to take the train into like deeper into the city. And I want you to talk about the Bridgeway School and how it's helped you. And I was like, easy. I can totally do that. I get to like go to the coffee shop. I get to do whatever I want, like freedom. And I get on the train, I get into this building, I have no idea where I'm going, and I end up sitting on this panel. And the mayor at the time, it was Michael Nutter, was it? He was there with his wife. And
you're like 17, 18 years old?
Yeah, I was 18 years old. I had no experience speaking. And my only job was to be like, hey, this school exists. We need money. Like I had no idea what I was doing. And I shared about like my story and like how, I grew up in Glen Mills and, had the house and the cars and my dad had a good job and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And like, we had this beautiful, perfect life. But like on the other side of that coin, like my mom was struggling with alcoholism and an eating disorder. And, she became somebody that was more dependent on me than I was on her. I took care of her. I was there for her, like kneeling by her bedside, like listening to her vent and, hurt and struggle. And
did you ever tell anybody, go to school and talk about that? I wonder, being a former educator.
Yeah. No.
Because people don't know what's going on behind closed doors.
Oh, no. I did not talk about it because like I was scared because like I didn't want any intervention because I was like, I don't know like if they're going to take my mom away. Like I was just like unsure. And then I also didn't talk about it because I didn't know it was like appropriate to talk about at school, which like today it's different, right? Like we know that you can go to the school counselor, you can go to your favorite teacher and talk about it. But I lived like these two different lives and I didn't know how to ask for help. And my dad was away a lot for work. And, when I was on that panel, like I talked about how my mom like attempted and completed suicide when I was 11.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And how I fell into my own addiction and self-harming and not going to school and failing classes and using every day and how quickly that happened and how being at a place like the Bridgeway School was so like key for me to be around other kids that were clean and sober and like doing what I was doing. And, we are who we surround ourselves with. And lo and behold, while I'm sharing just like a snapshot of my story, I'm sitting next to somebody named Carl who worked for Minding Your Mind at the time. And he pulled me aside and he was like, when you graduate from high school, I want you to work for us. Like, here's my email. We'll figure out the details later. And
what were you thinking then?
I was like, who is this guy? Like, I had no idea that it would launch into like a whole career where I travel like the country, It's
so interesting. We have a kind of our mission or vision here at the Lincoln Center. We say one moment, one choice, one connection at a time can change your life. And your short sharing right now is a principle that was trajectory and having this connection with Carl.
Yeah. All I said was yes. That was all I said. I was like, oh, I don't get to go to school. Awesome. Let's do it. I had no idea that like, taking apart, like basically what I was being of service, right? So I was like, I'm going to like do this thing. I'm going to share about the Bridgeway School. And then meeting Carl, it was like Carl trained me. He, was so instrumental in like helping me be able to share my story to kids in such a real and raw and vulnerable way. And, lo and behold, like 8 years later, it's like, wow, so much has happened.
So what are some of the big takeaways in the 8 years? What have you experienced? And, I guess you shared your story in a nutshell, obviously a lot longer when you're in the schools and presenting to kids. So what does that look like? And how do you see the impact?
I mean, I'll share with you why early intervention is so important and early prevention work is so important, because like I love speaking to high schoolers. I love speaking to college students, right? But even middle schoolers, right? Like they've been through the ringer. I mean, you never know what somebody's story is. And whenever I speak at a school, there's always like a line of kids that want to talk to me and say like, you shared my story. I thought I was the only one. And that's so beautiful, right? Because if they can identify with me and my challenges, that means that they can also identify with like the solutions, right? Like, oh, I've never tried going to therapy. I've never tried journaling. I never tried talking to my school counselor. Wait, I can bring my home stuff into school. Like, it's like these realizations like that you don't need to wait until you're in crisis to get help. But I'll tell you, like, I very rarely speak to elementary school students because we have a whole other program called Kind Minds where like a clinician comes in. They talk about like empathy and feelings, and it's more tailored to them. But this was a grant that was given to a elementary school in Kensington. And, Kensington, for those that don't know, it's a pretty rough neighborhood. It's a rough neighborhood in the city of Philadelphia. They call it the heroin capital of the world. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll speak to these kids. It was third graders. And I was speaking to the social worker that worked at that school. And I was like, so how do you want me to frame this? Because this is a lot of information. I talk about self-harm. I talk about suicide. I talk about sobriety. Like these are big topics. And she said, I'm going to level with you. I want you to talk to these kids as if you are talking to high schoolers because they have been through more than you could ever imagine. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And I went in and I did my thing, and they're all sitting on like their colorful mat, like for story
crisscross
time.
applesauce.
Yeah, right. I was like, okay, like there's like alphabets on the wall. And it was just a classroom. It was a classroom of kids. And at the end, I always do a Q&A. I'm like, do you have any questions? And they all just sat there and stared at me. And I was like, oh no, like this did not go good. And I'm like packing up my things and all the kids leave. And the teacher comes up to me and she's like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And I was like, oh no, like I'm fired. I was like, I did what you wanted me to do. And she said, I just want you to come into this classroom with me and just so we can like talk. And I was like, okay. And I walk over with her and all the kids are sitting there and they're sitting in little desks, and she looks at them and she smiles at them and she's like, okay, go ahead. And they all shoot their hands up. Question after question after question. My mom, my dad, my uncle, my brother, like struggles with this, struggles with that. Like my mom is in and out of jail. My dad is in and out of treatment. I've never met my biological siblings, and how much it meant to them that there was an adult in the room that not only kept it real, but showed them that there is hope and there is a solution. And it might look different for each person, right? Like depending on like what resources are available for you. But like I looked at all those little third graders and like I just saw that like that immediate impact. And that's why our work is so important.
I can see, if you can't see how passionate, almost tearing up when you're speaking about it. That was such a powerful. So how do you navigate that? Respectfully, not being a clinician, I guess, or a case manager, knowing what resources after you present, people wanting help or direction, what do you do? So
before I go into, I always go into every school early, 30-ish minutes early. Whoever I talk to, usually the point person that I'm connected with is either the school counselor, the school social worker, potentially the principal or vice principal. And they will walk me into the classroom, the auditorium, whatever, what have you. In those 15, 20 minutes that I have, I ask them, what is it that your school offers? And some counties or, if I'm going around Delaware County, Chester County, Montgomery County, I'm pretty familiar with the resources because I grew up in the area and I've spoken to so many schools in this area that I know where to direct kids. But I'll ask them, do you have SAP here? Do you have social workers? Who are your people that you go to if a kid is in crisis or if a kid is struggling? And then I'll echo those resources in my presentation. So like it's coming right from me. But most of the time, if there is a kid that will come up to me, which happens often, and they'll say like, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I always make sure before I leave the building that I connect them with their school counselor or their school social worker, or at least make sure that that school social worker has that child's name. Hopefully the connection is made, right? But like, I know that, you know, the school social worker is the expert. Like I'm coming in and I'm sharing, but you know, it's making sure that that information is correctly navigated in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are there any particular experiences you can share that were particularly challenging, or you felt a certain way?
Yeah.
You're nodding, so yes.
Yeah. I mean, listen, like, you know, there are some schools that I go into and they're like, this mental health presentation is the only time that we're going to talk about mental health. And it's like, dang, like I wish that wasn't the case, because if you bring me in or bring in any of our wonderful talented speakers, like they're going to open up a can of worms that you might not necessarily know how to handle, right? Because having the conversation the first time should never be the last time. It should be an ongoing conversation. But I mean, there have been difficulties, especially with students, right? Where like, I'll talk to a student and they'll say, I don't want to talk to the counselor. I don't want to talk to the school social worker. I don't even want to be here. I don't want to be in school. And like, you know, not a part of my job description, right? But like, there'll be times where like, I'll say to that student, like, I'll walk with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, yeah, like I'm off the clock, but I'll walk with you. I'll walk with you. I'll sit with you. You know, like in that little waiting room where like you wait for the counselor to be ready, and knowing that they have somebody with them, like, it's like, okay, like I can at least do that.
And somebody with them that really gets it. They really can resonate and relate with.
Right.
What was the catalyst in your recovery?
Goodness. You know, I was a tough cookie. I mean, I was the kid where if you told me I needed to go to the counseling office, I would roll my eyes and say, you have no idea what I've been through. Like I was just like, I had this hard shell exterior where I didn't trust anybody. And that's like the biggest piece, right? Like building trust, building a relationship with a student as like the professional. Like it's really hard to do that, especially if like that student has been harmed in the past, right? I mean, we see that with like, you know, students that have experienced like various levels of trauma. And, you know, I was that kid that never wanted to go to school. By my junior year, I had like a 1.5, failing all of my classes. I remember my French teacher, she had me come to school 3 days post, like we're in summer now, to help me finish my project so I could pass the class. I mean, she didn't have to do that, right? But like, it was like my school tried so hard, but I was so resistant because I was getting high every day. I was in and out of the hospital, in and out of treatment centers. You know, I had tried, you know, touring like alternative high schools. Like, I mean, my dad was like moving heaven and earth to try to get me to where I needed to go. And you know, if there was, I talk about this often, like if there was one thing that my dad did do that was so beneficial, was he would always check in on me like every day. Every night he would ask me like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How was your day? And like being like a 16, 17-year-old, I'd slam the door in his face. I'd yell at him. I'd cuss at him. Like I was not a very nice kid.
But he knew you were using too?
Yes, he did. And he would say to me like, I love you. I'm never going to give up on you. I'm never going to stop being there for you. And, you know, like, I remember being 17 years old and like being like the winter and thinking that I'm not going to make it past 18. And like having been to multiple treatment centers and having been to like the hospitals and like knowing in my core that drugs and alcohol were not helping me. Like they were hurting me. Knowing that like self-harm was like hurting me, knowing that like isolating and like it just wasn't working anymore. And like there's a reason why kids and adults, right, like use negative coping skills, because in the beginning they think it works because it hits like that instant gratification, like swiping the credit card or dating the boy you shouldn't date. Like it's like in the beginning it's like this is right, but at the end you're left broken, empty, alone. And like, that's where I was. And, it was around that time where I had the courage to like ask my dad, like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't. And my dad drove me to a treatment center called Karen Treatment Centers in Reading, Wernersville area. And I spent like 5 months in treatment.
And stayed sober ever since?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was February 9th of 2015. February 10th is my clean date. So yeah.
So how do you maintain your mental health, your recovery?
Yeah. So if there's one thing that this job has, it helps hold me accountable. Because if I go into a school and I'm talking to kids and I'm like, you need, I don't say you need, but I'm like, I talk about the toolbox analogy, right? Like what's in your toolbox? What can you use when you are feeling uncomfortable feelings? Because we don't want to mask them. We don't want to stuff them. We don't want to ignore them because like these uncomfortable feelings are little indicators, right? That we need something. So if you're feeling lonely, instead of like using a substance to try to numb that feeling, like trying to connect with somebody that like you love, right? So like making phone calls, texting people, FaceTiming people, like the way that I continue to stay healthy and generally happy, right, and fulfilled is like I go to 12-step meetings to like help maintain my recovery. Therapy is a huge component of mine. Like I've been in and out of therapy for like over 10 years. So like I know that like that's like something that's really helpful and has been helpful. I journal a lot. And I like to read. Like it's just like some things that I like to enjoy, and I work out, So
you're very intentional and cognizant of your toolbox, like
yes.
you said. So encouraging people to build their own.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And also like, like the emergency stuff too. Like for instance, like these past like week and a half, like these past couple of days, I've finally been feeling like myself, but there's like this weird bug going around where like everybody's getting sick, and like I couldn't go to the gym for a week. I couldn't go to a 12-step meeting. Like I couldn't surround myself with people that like are really important to me. And like I was left with like without 3 of my like most important positive coping skills. And like, not gonna lie, like I struggled. Like it was hard to be cooped up in the house by myself. And, it's like in those moments, it's like, okay, I can still journal. I can still go on walks. I have dogs, so like they're really great. Take them on walks. Make myself a meal, even if it's small. Like going back to the basics is what I tell kids all the time.
I was just going to ask that too. You touch on that, like where kids don't know where to start. They don't have that toolbox, and
mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a lot of it's like just like going back to the basics, like food, water, like celebrating the small successes. Like, a lot of the times, like I'll look at these kids, if I'm in like an auditorium, I'll be like, you're here. You're in school. That in and of itself is like, you might not think it's a huge accomplishment, but it's huge because like
take it from someone who didn't go.
Yeah, right. Like, it's like, that's amazing. You got dressed. Yeah. Like, did you brush your teeth this morning? That's awesome. Like, and it's like feeling like, even though somebody might be like, oh, like that's not that big of a deal. Like it is.
Because you got up, you showed up.
You showed up. Like you could have left this presentation 20 minutes ago and you stayed. So like, that's pretty cool.
And how big or small are the groups? Is there a size, a minimum, maximum when you speak?
Man, I've spoken to, there'll be times where I go to parent nights, which are the hardest. I don't know if you know, like you ever host a parent night? It's like nobody wants to go. It's like there'll be 2 parents and I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? I'm going to talk to both of you. Mm-hmm. And, there have been times where I've spoken to audiences of like 900 plus. So
do you integrate technology? It's been a while since I knew of you guys some years ago, but with like the clickers or kids can answer things on their phones. Do you integrate anything like that? When you have a bigger audience or even smaller, that it's anonymous and they can get a pulse on the room? Yeah.
So I feel I've done that in the past. I've sort of veered away from it just for like safety, right? Because like it is technically anonymous, but if somebody texts in like, hey, like I have suicidality, I want to make sure that like that child gets support. And if it is anonymous, it can be kind of scary.
Yeah.
So I usually try, I always try to like do a Q&A at the end. And believe it or not, like most kids are really receptive to answering questions out loud. I do have a PowerPoint and most of my PowerPoint is childhood pictures and like my toolbox and what that looks like, and pictures of me now and like the life that I live today. Like, 'cause my life is like completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
Something probably didn't imagine 10 years ago.
oh my gosh. If you were to tell me like, and I'm an easy crier, right? Obviously I've been holding back tears this entire conversation. But I mean, my life is unimaginable from what I could have ever thought it could be. Like living in like a safe home, right? Like I have like animals. I love animals. Like, having my animals, my dogs. I live with my partner, which like 99% sure he's going to propose in like 2 weeks, but we'll see now. We'll see what happens.
Pressure's on. That's great.
Yeah. But it's like, it's really cool that like, cause like a lot of things have happened in the inner rim. Like my dad got remarried, right? And like, like I'm getting together with my stepmom tomorrow and we're going shopping. Like, it's like, I would have never thought that I would have a mother again, or like a healthy, like one that wants to be there for me. I have a sister who's in 7th grade.
I was going to ask about siblings and how they, any mental health addiction with them.
So, I mean, like my brothers, we've all gone through our journey. I mean, I'm really grateful to say that like my brothers and I mean, one is 2 years older, one is 4 years older, and my brothers were all very close. My one brother had his own difficulties with his mental health and, was able to like get and receive help maybe like 6 years ago now. And like he goes to therapy and he has his own journey. And like whenever we talk on the phone, like we're always talking about recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like what that looks like in our lives. And, my other brother, he has his own journey. He lives in Texas with his wife. And, like I just try to call them and text them as much as possible because like we all lived something that a lot of people don't survive.
Yeah. I mean, losing a parent and then losing a parent to suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
how
especially,
traumatic. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, even like, especially like living with a parent that, like if anybody can relate, right? Like living with a parent that struggles with addiction, like, there's physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's lots of things that happen that like if you live in that prolonged period of stress for such a long time, like it really negatively affects a person. Like, you're basically on edge 24/7. And, something that I also talk a lot about, which I think is important, right? Like with our emotions. When my mom died, one of my biggest secrets that I kept, that I felt so much guilt and shame for, was like when my mom died, like I felt relief. And it was like, oh my gosh, like I can't feel this way. This is terrible. Like nobody told me that I could feel this way, that this was appropriate. But like, of course I felt relieved. Like I didn't have to be a mother to a person who was supposed to mother me. Like I could kind of have like a childhood again. And I didn't expose that until I was like 17 years old in a treatment center, right?
I would imagine some shame with that and unpacking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then like the coolest thing is, right? Like sort of like having this be so cyclical, like because I share like a version of that with kids, and there'll be kids that will come up to me in tears being like, oh my gosh, like I felt that way when my mom went to jail because like the house was peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I had no idea that you could feel that way. I was like, yeah, like, and that's so cool that like, those connections that we make. And then also like when I leave the school, these kids that are all in line, they're all from different groups and friend groups and areas that like they all see each other coming up talking to me. So now they know, oh, that person that's in my math class that I haven't talked to in 3 years, like
something's up.
They related and I would have never thought.
And school, there's no charge when schools bring you in, or is there a fee?
There's a suggested donation.
Okay. But always partnering with as many schools, or can you handle the capacity? You guys have grown so much.
Yeah. I mean, we have so many speakers. I mean, we just opened up a branch in LA, which is like so exciting. So we have I think we have 1 or 2 speakers over in LA that do their thing. We have our branch in Florida. We have a branch in New York and New Jersey. So we have like our little, areas where we are. But I mean, the demand is high.
So it's funny. So it keeps growing. I mean, you keep meeting the demand as the demand keeps increasing, which has also been such a change. We talked briefly before we started recording that, having been in public education for a long time, when you guys first started, schools were like, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like, well, we're not going to talk
Yeah.
about this unless there's an issue. And even if there is an issue, we're still not sure if we want to talk about it.
And now they're lining up. Sounds like there's enough business out there to bring you in and realize the relevance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that it is like, I'll have hit like 100, we were talking before, like 150 presentations, like from September to April I've done, which is like unbelievable. Right. And it's like, and that's just like one person with the organization. Like, and all of our speakers all have such unique and dynamic stories that, we can fill that need for most, if not any school.
And how is that determined? Does the school determine, who they want, or you're not? How do you figure out that match, or which speaker is going to take which school?
Yeah, so like on mindingourmind.org, we have like a little tab that says speakers, and it has all of our bios and all of our pictures. So if a school is requesting like, hey, I want a Minding Your Mind presentation, we'll give them the opportunity like, hey, like, do you want to check out bios? Do you want to see like who you're going to talk or who you want to come into your school? Most schools will be like, just send somebody. Send somebody that can talk about mental health, which is all of us, right? But there are also schools that will specifically request me because of my history with substance use disorder. And they'll say like, hey, we have, which a lot of schools do, a high risk substance use population. And we want her to talk more specifically about substance use. So I have pieces of my story that I'll shrink down and other pieces of my story that I'll sort of enlarge.
If they want to focus more on recovery. So you kind of follow the request.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it all kind of happens within that 15 minutes of me walking to
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's
flexibility.
Like, it's very much like, okay, this is what's going on with your school. Because on my end, right, like I don't do any of that. Like my end, I get my phone, I get a calendar invite from like one of our directors, and they say, hey, can you speak at this school March 11th?
You
and
say
I
yes
say
or no.
yes or no. But they are like the superheroes, right? Like they're like the Marissas and the Suzelles, and like those are the people that make it all happen and make those connections happen.
And I know you do some social media part of your job. Do you, what is that like? Are you messaging more through that?
Yeah, so my role with Minding Your Mind is like I'm a full-time young adult speaker, right? However, this year I was given the opportunity to like sort of work with our social media, and my job is more specifically like connecting with the speakers and saying, hey, I want you to send me like pictures of you at schools, videos of you at schools. Did a kid write you a note? Did you have an interesting interaction? Like what happened with you that I can bring this onto our platform to make it more real and tangible. And like, this is the actual boots on the ground work that we do. So I do a lot of posting. There will be times where people will reach out on Instagram and say like, hey, I want to be a speaker, and I can make that connection. So yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So have you received a note? What's a note that okay. Lots of notes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So many notes.
So what's one that you're like, wow, like a note that the student wrote you?
Can I read you one that I just recently got?
Yeah, please.
Okay. This was like, I have a whole shoebox of notes and drawings. Like kids will like draw me or, cause like there are a lot of kids who are artistic. And this was one that I got. And it says, Dear Kristen, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. Out of all the people that spoke, yours stuck with me the most. It helped me realize that it is a normal thing for people and that I'm not alone. I always thought that my problems weren't as bad as other people's and that they didn't matter, but you helped me understand even the smallest things can affect people and they still matter. Everything you said will stick with me for the rest of my life and continue to improve the way I think about myself.
Okay, I have chills. I think I'm going to cry.
Right. Like,
wow. And you're saying you've got many.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Like, and I like the thing is that like I got that note and I was just like filled with so much gratitude, because sometimes like you do walk into a school and you don't really know the impact that you make And it's just so beautiful because like when I have bad days or like days where I'm not feeling as confident or not feeling like myself or, maybe like, because I'm not always on 100% of the time, like that's not realistic, but I'll pull out that box and I'll read some notes and I'm like, oh, okay. Like
that's something to,
to
keep you going for sure.
Yeah.
So anybody listening, a parent that's worried about their child or a student, any advice? Like, what would you say to them? They're struggling. They haven't been fortunate enough to hear you speak.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's tough. I talk to parents a lot. I do a lot of parent presentations. It's not the majority, but it's a good bit. And a question that I always get from parents is, my child is struggling. They're always in their room. They're always on that phone, right? Like they don't talk to me. I try to talk to them and they always tell me I'm fine, I'm good. Like, and I'm fine is like, it's just not the real response, right? And you can't force your kid to get help, right? Like, I mean, my dad tried for so many years, like sitting me down in front of like 10 different therapists, right? Like, please, like maybe this will be the one. But something that I always tell parents is like within, holding boundaries, right? But our kids a lot of the time, like they mirror what we do, especially like the younger they are. And, something that my dad started to do when I started to get a little bit older was, he would come home from work and be like, man, like today sucked. Like today was a really tough day. But I'm really like happy to be home. Like I'm really grateful to like, be able to like sit down and have a meal. My dad, watching my dad like share his emotions within, a healthy like boundary was really important for me because it sort of gave me agency. Like, okay, if he's talking about his feelings, I can talk about my feelings. I would watch my dad, like start to read. Like he would have a bed or a book beside his bed and he would like read before bed. Like that was something that I started to like notice and not say anything, but I would like pick up on like, okay, maybe I shouldn't like be scrolling on my phone for an hour. Like maybe I should like read like a couple chapters. My dad started to go to therapy. Like, oh, okay, like that's an option, right? I should probably continue to go to therapy. So, there's that. And then there's also like, knowing that like parents, like you are not the experts. You shouldn't be the experts, but putting your child in front of the experts is probably the best bet that they have in trying to navigate their way through this world.
It's really helpful. And then for the students or youth that are listening, what would you say?
Well, first of all, I would say be kinder to yourself. I was so hard on myself. Like, I mean, there would be some days where like I would really tell myself, I'd be like, I'm going to go to school today. I'm going to do it. Like in the morning, like I'd lay my clothes out and be like, I'm really going to do it this time. And then I would wake up in the morning and I would be so depressed and so upset and like, feel like that I needed to get high. And I would say to myself like, oh, I can't go. I'm not going to go. And because I had set this goal for myself, like, oh, I'm going to go to school. It's going to happen. Like, and then I didn't like meet that. I would beat myself up. So I'd make myself feel lower. Right. And it's like, okay, maybe you didn't go to school for the first half of the day, but maybe you can like maybe like your dad can take you to school or you can like get to school the second half of the day. Like at least it was something, celebrating those little wins like I talked about before. And also like I see so often kids will go to the counseling office and right before they walk in, they walk out. They're like, I don't want to do it. I can't do it. Oh, like it's like that scared butterfly, like you're about to like jump into the water type feeling. And it's like that feeling is like not the feeling that you shouldn't do it. It's the feeling that like maybe something amazing is going to happen.
So push through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pushing through that feeling of like, it's sort of like pushing through that threshold of like, this unknown thing is going to be the thing that like maybe changes your life.
So kind of back to a trusted adult in school. Find somebody that you feel safe.
Yeah.
Could be the counseling department, could be a teacher.
Yeah. Because a lot of the time, like with kids, like their trusted adult isn't their parent. Like sometimes it's their friend's parent. Sometimes it's the coach. Sometimes it's the English teacher. I mean, my English teacher was somebody that I was super tight with. And like every week we would have a paper that we had to write, and it could be about anything that we wanted. And I was in middle school, and I would write a paper. It had to be 1 page, and it would be about like a little girl that was like going through having a mom that struggled with addiction. And of course it was me, right? Like he knew, shout out to Mr. Dixon. But he read my papers and he gave me like constructive feedback, like as an English teacher would, but he also like knew. Mm-hmm. And he like would talk about how great my writing was and how I should keep writing. And that was how I like figured out that writing worked for me. But when I was in treatment, like he's an author, he sent me his second book, but it was like unpublished. And like he wanted me to read it. And like how amazing, the fact that like that contact was still kept, and that like that was him showing me like, hey, remember when we like that was just so cool.
Your passion for what you do is palpable for people that can't see you, that are just listening. It's just really, just thank you so much for sharing such great information. What a great organization. Is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to share?
I guess there's just one more thing that might be useful for parents. Every time I speak, everybody's like, what about your dad? What about your dad? Right? Like, especially parents. They're like, I need to know. And my dad and I actually had the opportunity to do a podcast together. We got asked to be on the podcast called Conversations That Matter by Caron Treatment Centers. And we did like a 2-part episode sharing our story. So it's a little bit more in the weeds, like what it looked like more day to day for us. But my dad's perspective on having a kid that struggled with depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, self-harm, and also like what his life looks like today. So we did that. So
maybe Minding Your Mind will expand, right?
Yeah,
having parents, parent speakers.
Yeah, it very well could be, right?
And it started here.
Yeah.
But how relevant? No, it makes a lot of sense that, you're relating to kids that are experiencing, as you did as a youth.
Yeah.
But parents that are totally lost.
Yeah.
And not knowing what to do.
Yeah. And he's got the knack for it. He's a good speaker.
Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree then. Yeah.
But I'm just so appreciative of this. This was so, so, so wonderful. And just thank you for having us on.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.
TLC Connections is supported in part by the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth. Through education, counseling, coaching, and consulting, we empower people to make positive choices, meaningful connections, and transformational change. To learn more, visit thelincolncenter.com.